So here's the mistake almost everyone makes when they leave the UK. You think you've left, but as far as HMRC are concerned, you probably haven't. People imagine they've officially gone the moment the flight is booked, or the house sale completes, or the removal van pulls away and you're standing in an empty room thinking, that's it, I'm done. I don't live here anymore. But no, you can be unpacking boxes in Spain, Portugal, Thailand, Australia, and HMRC still treats you as if you're living your everyday life in the UK. Until you tell them properly and in the right way, the UK tax system often carries on as if you're just living a normal life in Manchester, Birmingham, London, or wherever. So, in this video, I want to walk you through how you actually tell HMRC you've left without the legal jargon and without the panic and without accidentally breaking anything. There are really three pillars to this. Number one is the P85, the I'm leaving form, if you don't usually do self assessment. Number two is the SA109, the residence form, if you do self assessment. And underneath both of those is the Statutory Residence Test, the SRT, which actually decides whether you're a UK tax resident or not. We're going to walk through all three as if we're doing this together, step by step. But a quick important disclaimer before we start: this is general education, not personal tax advice. Everyone's circumstances are a bit different and the rules do change. So if your situation is complicated, please speak to HMRC or a qualified tax advisor and always check the latest gov.uk guidance for your specific year. With that out of the way, let's start with the form nobody hears about until it's too late. Picture this: you've handed in your notice, you've hugged your mates goodbye, you've got your P45 in your hand, that little slip that sums up your pay and tax for the year so far. You're emotionally done with the UK, but HMRC's point of view, you're just someone who's stopped working. The P85 is the form you use when you've lived and worked in the UK. You're leaving during a tax year, so before the 5th of April, and you don't usually file a self assessment return. It's how you say to HMRC formally, I've left. Here's where I've gone, and here's what my situation looks like. Now, HMRC's own guidance basically says if you don't usually send a self assessment return, use a P85 to get your tax position right when you leave the UK. And to claim any refund that you might be due for that part year. And that bit is important because if you leave partway through a tax year, your PAYE tax may well have been calculated on the basis that you were going to work all year in the UK. When you leave early, you've often overpaid, and the P85 is what triggers HMRC to look at that and potentially send you your money back. A couple of key points. You can usually complete the P85 online through gov.uk, or you can do an on screen version, print it, and post it. You generally don't use the P85 if you're already going to do a self assessment return for the tax year you leave. HMRC explicitly say you don't need a P85 in that case because your return covers it. So think of the P85 as the goodbye form for people who've been on PAYE and aren't in the self assessment system. So let's walk it like you're filling it in. Before you even open the form, you'll want your P45, if you've got one, your national insurance number, the date you're leaving the UK, a contact address overseas, or at least somewhere HMRC can write to you. Then you sit down with a cup of tea and actually open the P85. So, section one is about you, the easy stuff: name, date of birth, UK address, national insurance, no drama. This is just HMRC making sure they're tying this to the right record. Section two is when and why you're leaving. This is where they ask, what date are you leaving the UK? Which country are you going to? Are you going to work full time abroad? Do you expect that move to last a whole tax year or more? If you've already got a job lined up overseas, they'll want the employer's detail. If you haven't, maybe you're retiring or taking a break, you simply explain that. Section 3 is your last UK job or income, and here's where the P45 comes in. You tell HMRC who your employer was, when you stopped work, how much you earned, and how much tax was deducted. If you don't have a P45, for example, you're still technically employed by a UK company but will be working abroad, you can explain that too. Section 4 is the residence type questions. This is the bit that feels a bit nosy. HMRC will ask things like, do you still have a home in the UK? How many days do you expect to spend in the UK in the next few years? Are you going to be working full time overseas? It can feel like they're testing you, but really, this is about plugging you into the Statutory Residence Test, the SRT, to work out whether you're likely to be treated as a UK resident or non resident for that tax year. And Section 5 is any refund. If a refund is due, HMRC will usually send it as a cheque in pounds sterling to either you or a nominee address in the UK. They currently don't pay P85 refunds directly to foreign bank accounts. And that's basically it. Once you hit submit or post it off, HMRC update your record, look at your PAYE positions, and either adjust your tax or issue any repayment that's due. Now let's flip to a slightly different story. This time you're already in the self assessment system. Maybe you're self-employed, or you've got a rental property, or some higher investment income, or you're a company director and you're already doing self-assessment tax returns every year. HMRC own guidance say you generally don't need to do a P85 as well for the tax year you leave. Instead, what matters is your SA100, the main tax return, and the SA109, the residence remittance basis. The SA109 is where you tell HMRC whether you're a UK resident or non resident for that year. Claim split year treatment if you qualify, so part of the year UK resident and part of it non resident. Deal with domicile and the remittance basis if you're in that world. Now, here's the bit that catches people out every year. You can't submit the SA 109 using HMRC's basic free online filing. If you want to use an SA 109, you either file a paper tax return, an SA 100 plus an SA 109 by post, or use commercial tax software that supports SA 109 and submits it electronically, or get an advisor to do it for you using software. So, in simple terms, no self assessment, P85 is usually the route. Already on self assessment, skip the P85, use the SA100 and SA109 to tell HMRC you've left and what your residence position is. Now we get to the engine room of all of this, the Statutory Residence Test, the SRT. This is the bit that decides whether HMRC treats you as a UK resident for the tax year or non resident. And the key idea is this: you don't become a non resident just because you feel like you've left. You become non resident if you meet the rules. Think of the SRT as a 3-step staircase. Step 1 are the automatic overseas tests. If none of the UK tests grab you, we look at the automatic overseas tests. Broadly, you're automatically non-resident if you were UK resident in at least one of the 3 last tax years and you spend fewer than 16 days in the UK this year, or if you were not a UK resident in all of the last 3 tax years and you spend fewer than 48 days in the UK this year, or you work full time overseas with no significant break and spend fewer than 91 days in the UK in the year and work in the UK on fewer than 31 days a year, where the UK workday is more than 3 hours. Meet one of those and you're non-resident, even if you still feel very tied to the UK emotionally. Step 2 are the automatic UK tests. If any of these apply and you don't meet any automatic overseas test, you're a UK resident. So these ones are you spend 183 days or more in the UK in that year, or you have a home in the UK for more than 90 days in a row. You're in that home for at least 30 separate days of the year, and broadly speaking, you either have no overseas home or you use your UK home more than any overseas home, or you work a full time in the UK over a 365-day period, more than 75% of your work days are in the UK, and at least one of those work days falls in the tax year you're looking at. If you meet one of those and don't meet an overseas test, you're done. You're a UK resident for that tax year. So, step 3 is the sufficient ties test. If you don't fall into the automatic UK or the automatic overseas test, this is where things get a bit detective-y and where you've got to be pretty careful because you move into the sufficient ties test. HMRC look at two things together: how many days you spend in the UK in that tax year, how many ties in the UK you've got. And ties include family tie, spouse, partner, or a minor child, children in the UK, accommodation tie, a place available to you for 91 days or more where you actually can stay, a work tie, working in the UK for 40 plus days in the year, a 90-day tie, you've spent 90 plus days in the UK or one of the previous two tax years, and for some people, a country tie. The more days you spend here and the more ties you have, the more likely the SRT will say, actually, you're still a UK resident. That's why so many expats keep travel logs, flight confirmations, evidence of overseas accommodation and work. Because if HMRC ever challenges it, you're essentially responsible of proving your story against this rulebook. And by the way, if the SRT feels overwhelming, I've already done a deep dive video on it. That was Wednesday's upload. It took me hours to translate HMRC's 160-page guidance into plain English. But if you want to really understand how residence is decided, that video will make the whole thing click. I'll link the video at the end of the description. So let's bring this all down to a checklist. 1, you work out which route you're on. If you don't normally do a self-assessment return, you'll usually use a P85 when you leave to get your tax right and claim any refund. If you do self-assessment already, you don't need a P85. Instead, you complete the SA100 as you normally would and the SA109. That's where you deal with residence, split year and all of that. 2 is watch the deadlines for the self-assessment. The paper returns normally due on the 31st of October after the end of the tax year, and the online returns normally due on the 31st of January after the end of the tax year. Miss those and you get penalties, even if no extra tax is due. 3, keep your evidence, especially if you're going to rely on the SRT or claim split year treatment. So keep flight tickets, boarding passes, proof of overseas employment, overseas tenancy or property documents, a simple log of days spent in the UK versus abroad. If HMRC ever asks, why do you think you're non resident? You're not relying on vibes, you've got a paper trail. And 4, remember non residence doesn't mean no UK tax ever, even if you're non resident. UK rental income, certain UK investments, and some other UK source income can still be taxable in the UK even while you're living abroad. That's where proper advice can really pay for itself. A quick extra thing before we wrap this up. Because this comes up constantly, I've built a full statutory residence test infographic that puts all of the automatic tests and ties into one long page. If you want it, just hit subscribe and comment, I've subbed, SRT guide, please. And I'll reply with the download link. It'll save you digging through HMRC's 160-page manual. Trust me. Leaving the UK isn't just a geography, it's a tax residency decision. If you don't leave with it properly, you can end up in this horrible limbo where HMRC still treats you as a UK resident, your tax code is wrong, and letters keep arriving at your old address years after you thought you'd left. So, to quickly recap, P85 is usually the route if you're PAYE only and you don't do self assessment. The SA109 with a self assessment return is the route if you do self assessment. And underneath all of this is the Statutory Residence Test, which is actually what decides whether you're a UK resident or not. If you get those pieces lined up, you can step into your new life abroad with far less stress and far fewer nasty surprises. If you found this helpful, and if you're in that phase of leaving the UK, moving abroad, or just trying to understand what HMRC actually wants from you, hit subscribe. This channel is unpacking everything I wish I'd known: the HMRC bits, the logistics, the mindset shifts, the fears, the excitement, the actual journey, the freedom, the whole shebang. This is Spence Unpacked, and I'll see you on the next one.